Welcome to my garden journey. I'm John and it's March. Temperatures are starting to rise and it's getting busier in the garden. March is a busier month in the garden, and as we're in the lockdown here, I've had to order my seeds online, and they've come in the last week or so. I would normally go down to the garden centre and browse the seeds that they have there, but this year I've had to order them all online, so it's taken a little bit more planning than I have in previous years. The weather here in the UK is a little bit more erratic this time of the year, so some days we have absolutely glorious sunshine, getting temperatures up to 15 degrees and potentially 25 degrees here in the greenhouse. But it also can go down to freezing quite quickly. And today we're sitting at a comfortable 5 to 6 degrees. I started sowing seeds back in February on my heated propagation bed. Not all seeds are germinated yet, but I've got a really good batch of lettuce and some sprouts coming through as well. So I'm really pleased with how things are going, and hopefully over the next week or so, the other seeds will start to germinate. I have added another tool to my heated propagation bed, and I'll show you that later on in the video. In the past few weeks I've gotten a few more subscribers, so I just want to say thank you and welcome. It's really appreciated. And if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please give it a go and follow me along my journey, learning about gardening and sharing it with you on YouTube. Tomatoes have been a big part of my growing experience since I started growing my own food. And they were one of the first fruits that I grew in my garden. They've also been part of a relationship I had with my grandfather-in-law. He would every single year grow far more tomato plants than he needed and would always share them out across the family. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago now, and we don't get those tomatoes from him. So I'm trying to carry on that tradition, and I will be growing far more tomatoes than I could ever use in my garden, and I'll be handing them out to my family too. I'm going to be growing 3 varieties of tomatoes this year. 2 I would call standard varieties, and the final one is a more novel one, which is a beefsteak tomato. The first seed I'll be sowing is a F1 Fantasio. I think that's how it's pronounced. I may have butchered that, but I'll be sowing them into these seed trays, and I'm just using a standard seed compost to start them off in. Next up is the beefsteak tomato, and like the previous one, I'll be sowing those directly into a seed tray and using some standard compost as well. I'll just be interested to see how the seed compost and the general compost will do, see if there's any real difference between the two of them. The seeds for all of the tomatoes are evenly spaced, and once they become strong seedlings, I'll be transferring them into bigger pots. Finally is a F1 tumbler, so these are ones which are designed to go into hanging baskets. I've never done those before, so I thought I'd give them a go this year. All 3 of the tomato varieties will be covered over with around about a centimetre's worth of compost, and then watered thoroughly and put over onto the heated propagation bed. The heated propagation bed is a really key feature in my greenhouse, as it allows me to start the year off that little bit earlier. I've had some problems with it in the past where it's dried out the compost because the heating's on all of the time. So this year I'm going to try a thermostat to see if I can regulate the temperature that little bit better and avoid the compost becoming so dry. This is a very basic thermostat and it interrupts the power supply to the heating coil. Setup is fairly simple. You just plug the heating coil into the thermostat and then the thermostat into the main power supply. The thermostat takes its reading from this probe. The probe can be put into any of the mediums that you're growing in, such as the seed compost or the general compost. With the probe in the compost, you can see the temperature rising slowly here on the thermostat screen. Setting the temperature for when the heating wire will come on is really simple. Just press and hold the set button, it will flash, then just move the temperature up and down and press the set button once you've done. And there you have it. Now you've got a temperature controlled heated propagation bench. This is another vegetable that my grandfather-in-law would grow every single year and again share with me without asking for anything in return. I remember the last year that I helped him in his garden, it was leeks that we were planting out into his veg patch, and hopefully he got to enjoy those towards the end of his life. The variety of leek that I'll be growing this year is Autumn Neptune. I'm sowing these in seed trays and seed stations and just sprinkling the seeds over the compost. I'll let the seeds germinate here in these seed trays and I'll let them grow on here until they're around about sort of pencil height, and then I'll transplant them out into the actual veg patch itself. Once I've sown all of the seeds, I'm just covering over with around about a centimetre to 2 centimetres worth of compost before giving it a really good soak. This year I'm going to grow some of my own flowers, and I'm starting off with sowing some violas. One of my aims is to really make my gardens look very beautiful this year, and I plan to have a significant amount of flowers, far more than I usually do each year. So I plan to sow quite a lot of these seeds so I can get really densely populated borders. And if I've got a few left over, I'll see if I can get some of them sold to my neighbours. Next up is Cosmos, another bedding plant which I'll be sowing quite a lot of seeds for. And again, I hope to be able to get really nicely populated borders, and any excess I'll be trying to see if I can pass on to neighbours and family members. As with all of the seeds that I've sown, they're just being placed on top of a bed of compost which has been firmly pressed in, and then I'll be covering these over with around about a centimetre's worth of compost just to finish it off, followed by a really good watering.
Most of my videos are focused on the practical elements of gardening, but gardening has benefits that are far greater than just producing your own food. I find sowing seeds to be so mindful, and it's just a really nice distraction from all of the hassle that's going on, whether it's been this year or previous years. The plants themselves also can bring with them some memories. So growing up with my parents sowing and picking runner beans, the tomatoes and leeks with the grandfather-in-law, and tomatoes with my own grandfather as well. I just remember his greenhouse being full of them. So gardening for me is just more than the produce, it's the experience. And hopefully you guys will come along for my journey, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. So if you like this sort of content, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.